someone else from the issue. If is she behind me? And that moment, you know, that moment in the horror movie where you're just like, oh, they're behind you, right? It's past. Please do not confuse her with her evil twin Angela. This is Andrea DeAngelis.
Yes, get the lower for me. Yes, that's good, right? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So I haven't done this in a very long time, so this is going to be interesting. This is a short story. I think it's a ghost story. All right, I'm going to give it a whirl. Let me know if I'm not loud. Mara. There's an echo.
Good, it's creepy.
Okay, it's creepy, right? Okay. All right, so that's a short story name. All right. Mara. I liked the way he mouthed it, softly, like a sweetness, even though he trapped me here by sealing the crack I came through. I liked his warm, wet mouth, and maybe I asked for such an imprisonment. I'd been haunting him for weeks like a dream. But I am not a dream. I'm the other thing. I was only mist before slipping through the crack beside his bed. I could only speak to him while he was sleeping. I knew he heard me because of his tossing and turning. I hungered to taste the sweat of him. The gray waters of the northern coast were not enough for my fisherman. His intense loneliness shone to me, beckoning. But speaking to him in this fleeting way didn't give him any comfort. I like to think he had to meet me, which is why he trapped me. As I drifted through his bedroom that cold, salty night, he leapt from his bed, naked, slapping his hand over the narrow opening, my only egress, and plugged the space with mutton fat from his candle. The wispy tendrils of my cell solidified at the sight of him, and he looked at me as if he could see me. I drank him in. I warmed his bed that night, and after he fell asleep, I watched him. I do not sleep. I have slept too long already. I caressed him, unused to the sensation of touching, and I relished it. In daylight, he was younger than I initially thought in the black and gray of night. He was red-cheeked under his rough, sandy beard, and his darting brown eyes had the drinkable spark of youth. In the morning he awoke and told me, "Since you have chosen to haunt me, you can serve as my wife." Sorry, page turn here. His voice startled me. It was deep and angry like a gash of wind, yet exhilarating. I did not understand what serving meant, but his voice opened me to the possibility. "You are pretty for one so pale. You please me." I touched his mouth to feel the words and his bristles. After a moment, he pushed my hand away. Was he as frightened as I was? He got up, dressed in silence, throwing a long, worn shirt and pants my way. I watched how he put on his extra skin and did the same, following him into the cottage's kitchen and sitting room. I must go to shore to fish. He pointed to the pile of wet webs in the corner. "Bend those nets." He left clumsily, still night drunk with me. I took the matted, torn nets in my translucent hands. I had no memory of flesh being so white, almost blue in the early morning light. I remembered my fingers, but not my skin. It had been an eternity since I had a physical shape, but my fingers knew what to do, as if I was familiar with their strange, yet elegant architecture. Perhaps I wasn't from the night, but from the sea, both deep, dark, and unforgiving. I felt my fisherman return before I saw him. The wanting was heavy like waves swallowing me. An hour earlier, I started to dissolve without his flesh being near. I needed him. I slipped outside into the bright light. Stunned by the sun, I almost stumbled on the black stone beach. Seeing him stride up the rocky path, I ran to him with my bare, unfamiliar feet. His face, still caught in a dream, shuddered. So I stopped before reaching him. We stood 3 arm lengths away. "What is your name?" he asked. "I do not know." "Where do you come from?" "I do not know." "What are you?" "Am I not your wife?" His lips parted and closed. He scratched his beard, thinking, "You are my wife still, but you have another name." He rubbed his tired eyes. "You are a nightmare. You were a nightmare, but in the day," I interrupted him. He was close to knowing. "I am Mara." Once he repeated it, I was sure of its sound. "Mara." He drew out the enunciation. "Yes." He continued to rub his eyes, like he had upon first waking. He came closer to me, an arm's length now. "Do you know where you come from?" I shook my head. I was something like a moth before. Maybe I'd even been someone else before becoming part of the night and the endless mist, but I did not tell him this. He didn't ask me any more questions, because I kissed his mouth to stop the gnawing words. He only whispered, "Mara," into my dark cloud of hair. After I embraced him, I felt more solid, less too loosely tethered to my tender new skin. I could love him for filling me this way. Later, I hung his catch of mackerel and herring to dry over the smoking seaweed-lined pits behind his battered cottage. I caught the eye of his suspicious neighbors in the afternoon's long shadows. My fishermen had been along for so long, they were unsure what to make of me. He told me not to speak to his neighbors. He was afraid they'd steal me. For a few days, they only nodded at me, but didn't speak or come any closer. They were like mist, fading and disintegrating, until Hilda. "I used to be as young as you once," she croaked. "The sea and salt have had their way with me. My blonde hair is limp and growing colorless. Men and children will do that to you. They will suck the life out of you." Indeed, Hilda looked empty and carved out. "They will leave you for devils and demons, unless you suck the life out of them first," she hissed and shuffled away. Over the next few weeks, every time my fisherman embraced me, I felt bits of him pulling away. At first, I only absorbed his red cheeks, my own growing plump and rosy and kind. Under my caresses, his hair, rusted and thin, the tangled strands coming away like kelp, caught my netting of skin and nails. My own hair shone thick and dark, enough to drown in. My lips and skin grew pinker every night we spent together, while his grew pallid and his eyes fell fallow. It was easy enough to see I was killing him with my living, but I savored the corporal and the carnal gorging, the warmth in my crevices, the buffering of the harsh wind against my skin. Every sensation I had been without for so long, I reveled in. I'd forgotten the lushness of life. Fragments of memory loosened and floated back to me of who I was before. They were clouded images at first, then the memories condensed and thickened into fleshy remembrance. I draw my fisherman's life out every night like the vapor I was, the bones underneath his skin rising up to the surface like the sea's leavings on the shore. But won't his fate be similar to the women here? Just a faster drain. For them it takes years, for him mere weeks. I didn't want my fisherman to die, but I didn't want to die either. Women die in childbirth all the time, pushing more men out into this world. Shouldn't a man die instead this time? And with that splaying of that thought into the dark beach, I knew how I had died. Giving birth, my nameless male mate away at sea, leaving me to bleed out like a broken beast. Still, I would like to swell with another child, girl of ice and anger, but I don't think my fisherman will survive the ride.